7 o'clock. I'd like to call the Finance Committee to order for tonight. I'd like to call Mason forward, and for tonight we'll be going through a number of budget. We'll be hearing from a number of different departments regarding their fiscal year 25 budget. We'll be starting with the Council on Aging, and then going to the city auditor, the building inspection, the collector. We'll be hearing from the public library, the assessor, the elections, planning and development, and then finishing off with veteran services. Our focus tonight is because this is the first of three nights of these budget review nights, we'll be focusing on some of the smaller and hopefully more straightforward budgets. Mason and I have been meeting on Mondays and sort of talking about sort of a plan for going through and reviewing these, and I think this is a good plan to move forward. And so before we begin, Mason, do you have any thoughts or anything before we get started?
Not really. Just to reiterate, if any counselors have specific questions or things you'd like me to go into further depth on at like the public hearing or some of the follow-on meetings, I'm happy to do that. Email me any questions, or if you're looking for anything specific for me to present on. Again, happy to kind of go into depth on some of like the broader topics in the budget, and obviously the focus here is, I believe, the department budgets. A couple things just before we get into the department budgets, just so everyone's aware, you'll notice in salary lines, there was an increase in most salary lines from the requested to the proposed. That just has to do with the exempt COLAs that this honorable body passed recently. So that's why you're going to see kind of that discrepancy between those two lines across most budgets. And as well as in this budget, one of the things we did was you're not going to see pennies in all the accounts, so we essentially rounded up to the nearest dollar. So when you see things on the salary sheet, you might see, 79,000, 54. You see 54 cents. It's going to be rounded up to the nearest dollar. So just if you're, you see those numbers, you're like, those don't exactly match. So hopefully that makes things a little bit easier for for us throughout the course of the fiscal year. And so I just wanted to call attention to that. So.
Perfect. And as always, Deb, thank you for joining us, and I'm sure these will be a few long nights, but we definitely appreciate it. And do you have anything before we get started?
I don't. I think, like most of you, I was pretty impressed with the budget that the administration put together. It's Mason's first year. He added a lot of narrative and different graphs and supplemental information. I do appreciate the rounding. We talked about that. So it goes up to the nearest whole dollar. It helps to not worry about when payroll goes out 4 decimal places. So it's a small but meaningful change in my world. It didn't add a whole lot of money to the budget, so it's not something I was concerned about. Like Mason, I'm here and available if you have some questions specific for me that you find that I might be able to add some value. I didn't sit in on all the department head meetings, so probably a greater level of detail and specifics to the 25 budget would be available for Mason. But certainly if there's follow-up questions on where we stand in 24, and as we've spoken about Councilor Kobus, future conversations about other broader topics outside of today, if anybody needs information on the revenue side or any of those things in the future meetings, you're also welcome to call my office, and we'll help as much as we possibly can.
Perfect. And again, a reminder for the new counselors, with the budget in our responsibility, we can't suggest where to spend money. The only thing in our roles that we can do is we can strike a line in as part of our review. We can reduce the budget and strike a line. That is all that we can do in our roles. But that's all that we can do as part of our review and with the budget that we approve and send forward. And then also, the mayor and Mason are coming down on the 14th for the public hearing. And so, again, I'll reiterate that for that day, if there are broader questions for sort of, or big picture questions, please have those questions, send those questions ahead of time or have them ready for the 14th. So for this, we'll be digging into the weeds, department by department, but, you know, have the sort of like the bigger picture questions ready for the 14th. All right? Councilor Tavares.
To that point, I don't know if it would be appropriate to bring it up, but because Mason is here, I figured, kill a couple birds with one stone. Would it be appropriate during that meeting to maybe have a...
The public hearing?
Yes, for
Okay.
public hearing. Sorry. To have an overview of sort of where we stand with outstanding ARPA funds, like the big ticket items that are still, maybe they're contracted for at this point and they're slated to get done. Just sort of like the status of all those funds. Like I'm thinking, we've got the Lindsay Street project, but then some other things. I don't know if all the funds have been allocated or not. Things like that. So,
That,
yeah, just wanted to bring that up.
that would be a great update to get during that time.
Yeah, absolutely. We can certainly do that.
Yeah, cool.
Perfect. Anything else? Without further ado?
And then Chair Kovas, if I know you had your data requests, and I believe you might have sent out some materials, but I do have year-to-date budgets. If anybody needs them, it's entirely up to you and the members of the council.
Sure, if you wanted to pass those around. I have not had a chance to, thank you for getting that out to me yesterday. I have not had a chance to put together my analysis of that yet.
So these should be packets with every budget, a year-to-date budget for each one of the departments that we're going through tonight. It should be in order. I apologize if something got
Perfect.
switched around.
Thank you very much.
Did you,
Thank you.
And welcome, and we'll let you go ahead and speak about the Council on Aging and how does fiscal year 25 look, and welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. It's nice to see everybody. This is my first budget for the city of Attleboro, and I want to thank Mason because he's been very supportive throughout that process. And I'm pleased to report that we have a very lean budget, and we've managed to take a very close look at all of the salaries and being mindful of the burden to the taxpayers. And we've transitioned 5 part-time positions and 40% of a program assistant to the formula grant. And for those that may not be aware, based on the census of individuals age 60 and above, we get a per person allocation. And in this instance for FY23, it was $13 an hour. And why am I saying fiscal year 23? Those are the formula funds that we are using and putting into the FY25 budget. For whatever reason, in years past, we haven't necessarily focused on that in terms of those grant funds, and we are for FY25. So that's shifting approximately $70,000 from the general fund to the formula grant in terms of those expenses. We've taken a very close look at staffing and really getting down in the weeds and appreciating that we need to see exactly what the needs of the Council on Aging are. And as a result, we did eliminate a very part-time position, 10 hours. In light of the technology advances that we've had at the COA and pending ones, hopefully with Munis, we feel that those tasks, some of them will go away and some of them will be absorbed into others, their scope of work. if you will. So some of those things have decreased the numbers somewhat as well.
Council Foy.
First of all, thank you. Thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for this clear presentation on your budget. I'm just curious about whether you can quantify the services that you provide. You provide lunch services, you provide recreational services, you provide medical equipment loan services. Can you tell us how many people you provide your services to, and in what proportion those services are distributed among those people?
To give you exact numbers, Counselor, I wouldn't be able to do that this evening.
Of course not, but
One of our goals.
order of magnitude.
Sure. One of our goals in the coming year is to create an annual report to be able to give to the community, to the counselors, the taxpayers, so they can see exactly what goes on at the COA and the impact that the work is having. I can tell you at the top of the list is our outreach team. In terms of folks that can come into the Council on Aging at any given time, we don't know what that need might be, but the outreach team of about 2.5 FTEs is ready to be able to meet those needs. And it runs the gamut from something, I'll say, as simple as maybe applying for food stamps to something that's very complex, and I know everybody in this room is very aware of it. We have a housing crisis. And the most significant population of homelessness is those age 60 and over right now. It's a growing population. So a lot of times people are coming in and they're looking for ways to remain in the community and not live in their cars. The durable medical equipment, that is probably our most utilized program. There isn't a day that goes by, multiple times a day, that folks don't call in, whether it's a family member, a neighbor might be coming in on somebody's behalf to utilize a rollator, a shower chair, and that's a great service because it's keeping people safe and keeping them in their own homes. So that is a very highly utilized program. We do serve as the regional office for the SHINE program, and that is counseling for health insurance. And we are seeing, as you can imagine, because Attleboro has a very significant older adult population that's only going to continue to grow. And as more and more people are aging into Medicare, that service is going to be even more highly utilized, and the numbers increased exponentially. We're proud to have a new SHINE regional director on board, and she is incredibly knowledgeable, along with her team, the majority of which are volunteers, because that is a volunteer-based program for counselors. And that is something that we know will just grow exponentially, as well as the programs that you were alluding to. It runs the gamut as well. And in comparing us to other COAs within Bristol County, I can tell you that we have a very robust program offering. And it ranges from fitness classes to art classes. One of the things that we are really focusing on in the coming year, and we're really looking forward to this as a team, and working with the rec department in particular, to let you know we are transitioning 2 exercise classes that are happening on site at the COA. Because of the limited space that we have in there, it limits the number of participants to safely exercise in that space. We're moving to the rec center at Bartek, and that'll allow us to expand that program. So we're excited about that, and we're going to be working with other entities, including the library, the Attleboro Arts Museum, and trying to introduce memory cafes through other grant funding, not through the general fund. So we're excited about the coming year and it really expanding the programs even more.
What is a memory cafe?
Memory Cafe is a somewhat informal type of environment where people with dementia come with their caregivers and they participate in a program. For example, if we go to the Attleboro Arts Museum, we might do a theme at Valentine's Day and do mosaic hearts and serve some type of refreshment. So it's a relaxed environment. People can come to socialize and just be who they are and whatever level of dementia they may have.
I do have one other question, which has to do with where the food comes from for your lunch program. I lived for many years in Philadelphia. We had something called Philabundance, where restaurants, grocery stores, food purveyors of various sorts would donate to people, but also to charitable organizations, food. I don't know that we have anything like that here. Where does your food come from for the lunch programs?
The lunch is through Bristol Elder Services. They're one of the aging services agencies in the
So that
state.
agency provides all the food?
Through the Title III-C program of the Older Americans Act. It's the congregate meal program. And we do a Welcome Wednesday lunch once a month, and we're hoping to kind of expand that, utilizing sponsors, say from assisted livings that have the financial means to do that. We're actually bringing one in June, and they're going to be offering more of a gourmet type of lunch for the older adults.
Thank you.
Excellent. And a couple other quick questions. I do see that your overall budget is decreasing. And so one of my concerns is, so with last year, I know you guys provide a lot of services. Were there ever points where you were overrun or didn't have the staff that you needed to provide the services to the seniors, that because you just didn't have the staff available to, whether it was to provide the paperwork or the senior tax help or whatever services it was, because you didn't have the staff available, whereas now that you have less funds available because your budget is decreasing and the number of seniors in the city is increasing, that's going to be compounded. Is that going, like, where are we going to see this next year? Could you talk a little bit about any situations like that you saw last year, or what was this not a problem last year?
Well, I arrived on June 12th of last year, so it was at the end of the fiscal year, and to be honest, and that's reflected in some of the remarks in here, we had a 53% turnover in staff. So we have, and that was in FY23, and then we had a few more staff that departed. We essentially have a brand new team at the COA, maybe with the exception of a couple of positions. And it's a team that we're able to grow, and everybody's on the same page. And I think that's going to be a difference and play a role in FY25, because honestly, Counselor, we didn't have people in those seats to be able to do things. So some folks were wearing several hats in order to meet the needs of Attleboro residents. And they did it in spades, but it was a challenge, no doubt about it.
Okay.
I just have a couple of questions.
Yep.
So your narrative talks about shifting part-time employees to formula, and increasing for supplies and stuff in your general fund budget. The increases in the general fund budget for supplies and other things is not substantial. $70,000 going out for formula is substantial.
Correct.
Based on your numbers and what you're anticipating coming in, is it a permanent change going to formula for those salaries? If not, what's the plan going forward? And then just as a complete, somewhat related but aside for everybody else, there's a lot of other grants that the Council on Aging manages and does. Formula is just one of them. The SHINE grant that they touched upon for that staffing is one. And our offices have worked closely together, in particular as it relates to SHINE, and I would just formally like to say, there's some concern going forward, like how much money is going to be at the federal level to support Shine, and we need to be mindful of that and be aware that, it might take some doing at the state or federal level at some point to make sure those monies continue to be funded.
So I can comment further. So specifically as it relates to formula, so I think Kelly's comment around 70,000 sort of transitioning, sort of the maximum exposure this year for formula funds for those part-time salaries as well as the one program assistant, the partial salary and benefits is about 75,000. Kelly had mentioned the FY23 amount. The thinking there, so about 123, just under 124,000 came in through the formula grant in FY23. So the approach of the administration was, essentially kind of setting that as the ceiling for the exposure on formula for FY25. In FY24, I believe we brought in over 150,000 in formula funds, which we would not be tapping into during FY25. So the approach would be, if something were to happen, which I believe we're under a formula grant through 2032, I believe is the agreement, 2032. If something were to happen and those funds were to go away, we believe that we'd at least have a year of runway to look at shifting those back off, whether it would be on a prorated basis over 2 or 3 years. But we do think we'd have some runway to be able to adjust for that. And again, it's not that it's not just those costs coming out of formula grant. There's also things like some building maintenance, supplies cost. There's costs for like classes and programmatic costs that you guys do. Food and food supplies, to comment to what Councilor Foa had just asked about. So there's some other uses for those funds. But again, I think the approach here is, in the past, the COA budget's been sort of spread out through various different grant funds, and we wanted to kind of consolidate what types of expenses we had in those grant funds. So the thinking was, if we put part-time salaries into formula, and that's the plan, we'll kind of know exactly what those funds are being used for and plan for going forward.
That makes sense. I don't have any other questions. Good? Thank you very much, Kelly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, it's my budget next. Do you want me to go over there or stay here?
You can stay there. You can go We're a little bit behind.
I'll be,
This should be, yeah.
Yeah,
You're pretty straightforward. This budget's pretty straightforward.
yeah, so similar to some of the other budgets that you'll see tonight. The budget for the
Page
42 is the numbers.
42, yeah, 42 is the numbers.
Yeah, 42 is the actual budget numbers. Narrative starts on page 38. So salary is pretty straightforward. I'll just, we are in the process of interviewing for the planned hiring of the Assistant City Auditor. For those of you that remember, last year, we had, I had put in for the Assistant City Auditor's position, and the person who was planning on leaving agreed to stay for an extra year, which was great for me and much appreciated. So Liz is going to go to the reduced role effective July 1st, and we are interviewing actively for that position. By ordinance rather, it is an appointment of the city auditor confirmed by the municipal council. President Delicio and I have spoken a couple of times, so that will be coming before you. We're still at the first interview phase stage. So that's forthcoming from my office before the Honorable Municipal Council. Audit services, pretty straightforward. Outside annual audit for the financial statement. That also includes the single audit that my office is responsible for, as well as the financial statement audit for the Attleboro Redevelopment Authority. As a component unit of the city's financial statements, it's a requirement. If the Attleboro Redevelopment Authority had to incur costs relative to a single audit, they would be responsible for that because that's outside of the purview of the city and not needed on my part. The actuarial is predominantly to provide services for the GASB statements as it relates to other post-employment benefits. And staff development, there's an annual conference that myself and some staff members will attend, along with additional training throughout the year to keep us abreast of important developments in municipal finance matters here in the Commonwealth. And then office supplies, pretty straightforward, and memberships. And that is the total extent of my budget.
Too easy.
So I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has about the budget or anything else that we do in the office, if you have any.
I do not.
No?
Thank
Okay,
you very much.
perfect. Thanks.
Hey, Bill. Sure, welcome.
Page 82.
Do we know what page?
82.
82? Thank you. What's
Well, I can tell you that,
going on?
that besides our salary, contractual stuff, everything has been level funded. We were able to operate a good clip last year. With those numbers, we were able to keep them the same, still maintaining a high level of permitting, inspections. So it's pretty straightforward, to be quite honest with you.
It's very straightforward.
Yeah,
Like the numbers are
across the
exactly
board.
the
Our
same,
board's
yeah.
quite small. We've got 6 people that work in our office. Well, we've got 5. We'll be adding another one. Last year, we created the the facilities manager position with a deputy building commissioner. We did that. We never got to fill the local inspector's role when we bumped the other folks up. We're in the process now. We have a good candidate who we think is going to fit in great. It probably wouldn't be until, we'll probably be able to hold off on that until July 1st. But inspection, again, we do over 5,000 permits, 8,000 inspections a year. Got a good thing going over there, and I think that, I think we're in good shape.
Councilor Forward?
I see that you said that you generate significant revenue for the city's general fund.
Correct.
How much is that?
It's over $1 million.
I have another question, if I may. Councilor Provis?
Yeah, the floor is yours.
Okay. I have heard that once you do an inspection for a new residential property, so I guess it's an occupancy inspection, that there is a belief that the changes are made particularly to the disposition of wastewater, and that while there's a suspicion that changes are made, nobody in the city has the ability to go back in and double check 3 months later or 6 months later that things are still in compliance the way they're supposed to be. Is that true?
I don't understand the question,
Okay.
quite honestly.
Well,
Like, so
the
it's-
last part of the question
we
is,
give somebody an occupancy, they pass all
Point of order.
inspections.
I don't understand how this is budget.
We should try to keep the.
Okay.
I mean,
it's just,
um,
I understand. your
Councilor
point.
Lavoy, well, so first of all, we should try to keep the topics related to the budget, but this is an opportunity for all the department heads to come before us, so a little bit of leeway within the 15 minutes is okay. There is a little bit of an update element to it, but we should try to
just
keep it
seems like
related to the
something
budget.
maybe email.
And get the budget stuff first. So, Councilor Farr, go ahead.
So do you mean like maybe somebody connects a sump pump to a sewer pipe or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, we don't do
There's no follow-up
periodic,
inspections?
no.
Is that something you might like?
No,
Okay. You're looking to evaluate permit fees?
yes.
To increase them, I suppose.
To evaluate them to see where we are, and we haven't done that in quite a while, so I'm sure we wouldn't be in a position to lower them. We wouldn't need to be because we're not in any any high rate so not looking at them specifically to increase them, looking at them to make sure we're on par with other municipalities and towns and cities.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have one. Councilor Waterman, then Councilor Tavares.
What I would assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, the biggest change in your department is your job.
Correct.
And how much your job now encompasses. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and were there any surprises?
Yeah, sure. I wouldn't say that there's surprises. Maybe in the workload is maybe a little bit more of a surprise, but I think that between myself and the mayor's office, we're in the middle of like a learning curve with it, so we can kind of get it to a point where eventually it may grow into something on its own. It may need to increase size of just my department to incorporate some aspects of that. It's good. I have a very good working relationship, better than I had before, with all of the department heads. I get to see them quite more often. And that's where the additional body in my office on the building side of things will help, because with the deputy building commissioner and then having another field inspector out there, then we'll be in good shape with that. It'll let me concentrate a little bit more time on the building aspect, the facilities aspect of it. Thank you.
Councilor Tavares.
Just had a general question about if you could speak to the issue of permits and inspections in general, how those figures maybe have changed if over the years, whether they've gone up, down, sort of stayed the same. And then somewhat related question is the enforcement piece. Do you see a rise in that, or does that tend to be pretty steady, decline? And if there are any things that you think that are sort of affecting that.
Well, I can tell you that the inspections and permits have been up pre-COVID and have been not stopped. With the economy the way it is, when it was really rolling well, we were at a pace, we're still at that same pace. So people are still finding the money, doing the job, doing what they do. They're buying houses, they're building houses. So that surprisingly has, to me anyways, for the last 10 years has been it's been steady. And over the years prior to that, it was more of a winter time, you'd go into a lull. Springtime would start picking up again. November would come, it would start to slow down. December slow down. There's no slowing down anymore. It's just flat out. And so it's been busy. So enforcements have been up, but proportionally, I would say. So for the most part, people are good. The people of Attleboro, the residents of Attleboro are good. So the enforcement part is not as tough as some people may think it is. We have a good relationship too. We have a good demeanor in our office too, so I think that helps us. But for the most part, it's not as a burdening piece of the job as it could be. So with the uprise and the steadiness of the inspections, the enforcement hasn't been that much uptick as well. That kind of answers.
Yeah, it's good to know. Thank you.
One aspect, and I don't remember if I had seen it in your budget before or other budgets before, but I know you had led the way with doing the online permit requests and all of that. And I don't know if that was in your budget for that project or if it came down separately. And then last year, I believe we did the dog license, did the project
Expanded
for the dog.
a little bit into
yeah, so some expansions. I didn't see anything for any projects like that or any additional things like that. Did I miss it, or was there?
So I was actually going to comment on that. So one thing for the council to know is that the permitize, the annual cost associated with that, lives in the budget admin MIS budget.
Okay,
So
and
it
are we
actually lives in
growing
my
that or
department.
doing more?
So we're looking at expanding options. We did apply for a grant for a couple departments. We unfortunately did not get awarded those grant funds. So we're looking at potential other funding sources. There's a couple departments we'd like to move forward with. So hopefully, at least one. It's a matter of timing, funding, as well as it's a big load to bring on. I mean, it took a while to do.
Yeah,
so-
there's definitely a learning curve there, but I gotta tell you, with where we are, with the staff size we have, we'd never be able to do what we do.
Oh,
without-
absolutely. And the more we can lean into that, the
It's
better.
great. And I think it fits our department probably more so on that manner than it would with other departments as far as the amount that it helped us. But I still think it would be beneficial for other departments, but it really helped us with the way that our department works.
The other consideration that might happen is if this does become expanded services to multiple departments, where those funds come from on an annual basis may change, whether we want to decentralize that to the departments in their budget or keep it in MIS. That's something that probably remains to be determined, but just something that the council should, probably keep an eye out for going forward.
Okay, that makes sense. Councilor Dolan?
Thank you. When was the last time that we raised our fees?
Probably 10 years.
And is that something that we can do internal, or are we going to have to hire somebody to study that?
Well, I think a recommendation from myself will go to the mayor's office, and the mayor would send that down to the council.
So you would just do the research yourself?
Yes.
Okay.
And all that would be backed up with the send down and the discussion that we could have when that happens, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we go to Deb?
So, year-to-date, Council Forward today, posted in the general fund for building permits is $582,433. There's other revenue sources, like electrical permits, plumbing permits, mechanical, which are carved out separately. The total as of right now posted is about $778,000, a little over that. The other share of some of those permit revenues goes into a revolving fund for direct inspection services that are paid for under the ordinance 20 and how that lays out. The only question I had specific to your budget, Bill, is the year-to-date expenses for FY '24 actual expended in like your your purchase of service categories. I think it's pretty low. My recollection is some of that stuff goes towards the end of the year for your staff development reimbursements to your staff, I think.
Some of it does, and other things too, we'll stock up on some office things, and at the end, we try not to spend it unless we have to.
So, like, it's just, as a percentage of your budget expended, it isn't significant yet, whereas other departments might be almost completely spent. In some of your categories, I think you spend usually towards the tail end.
Yeah, and I think if you look at those categories too, you'll see that there's the amount of money, the funding for it is relatively small.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I just want to make sure that people don't look at it and say, he hasn't spent it, he
Yeah, I
doesn't
mean,
need
if
it.
it was $10,000 for the expenses, there wouldn't be $9,800 in there right now.
Right.
But at $2,000, we may have $1,500 left,
Okay. That's it. I don't really have anything.
Outstanding. Anything else for us? Great to
It
see
is
you.
what it is.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Phil. Thank you so much. Oh, that's there.
Sector up. Welcome.
Hi.
Page
51.
51.
It's never this quick.
Welcome.
Thank you. This is always very nerve-wracking.
Oh, it shouldn't be. This.
Yeah, my
How are we
budget
doing?
is pretty much the same year from year. My biggest thing is the postage. Every year I
Every year,
struggle. I
yeah.
struggle with postage. So My plan this year, it is to go, instead of billing 4 times a year, to bill twice a year. They're still gonna pay your bills 4 times a year, but you're gonna get 2 bills in one billing. And that's gonna cost the postage, it's gonna cut it by half, it's gonna cost the envelopes, paper, so we should save quite a bit of money. And from what I've been told, it's a go. It looks very promising for the July billing, so. Besides that, I'm pretty much level funded, right? I mean, the budget, the salary goes up every year based on increases, but everything else, very straightforward. I hate to repeat myself over and over again, but.
Yeah, no, it's very flat across the board. Council Dolan and then Council Tavares.
How much do you expect to save by going to 2 times a year versus 4?
I mean, right now, my postage just for the real estate and utilities, it's like 56,000. So cutting that in half, I'm gonna go on the 30,000. So that's big savings right there. And then the paper, I order paper once a year. I order 120,000 pieces of bill paper. That's gonna be cut in half. Same thing with the envelopes.
So substantial.
One of the things you'll see in the budget is, so it is at a level number right now, which you'll actually see in the year to date that they've spent more than that to this point, or the revised budget is more than that. So there is an increase in postage on, I believe, July 14th. So I believe it goes up by 5 cents. So that's, those increases are being felt across the city's budget. But in this case specifically, we decided not to increase that line with the anticipation of going to this semi-annual mailing. Could potentially be other costs for reminders. You said you might want to send out,
Yeah, but I think with, the internet, and I think we should be able to get across people. If anything, I'll probably send little postcards, which probably cost like, 37 cents or something out. Like the first time I send the bills out, I might send a little postcard, just explain it to the residents, because they're gonna have to remember to save part of the bill, and in November, I'm gonna have to remind them again that the bill is due, because they're not going to get the actual bill in the mail. So it's going to be a little getting used to for the residents that used to getting a bill every 3 months. But the majority of the people do have escrow,
Right.
and they don't even open their bills, to be honest. So I don't think that's going to affect them much. So it's the people that still like the hands on their bills, and that's going to feel the impact.
Council Tavares.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you said that. That was what my question was about. It was just really a clarification. Just what you said earlier, was making me think. So this would be semi-annual billing. So for real estate and utility bills, that
Just
would
the
be
real estate.
Oh, just real estate.
Yeah,
Okay.
because the
okay.
utility is billed quarterly,
That's
and
right.
that's based on usage, so I don't think the residents would want to get just 2 bills a year.
Gotcha. So it would be 2 bills, and then you'd pay them, sort of when they're due in
Yeah,
their
so
respective quarters.
the July bill that would go out would have the statement for the August and the November, so.
Yeah, I
the
was
homeowners-
just thinking
yeah.
about confusion with residents. I mean, what you said makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
To maybe send some sort of, instructional postcard or something.
Yeah, and I know some cities even put like something uptown, like a banner or something. I know that, I don't know if that's something that the city of Attleboro would want to look into, but I've seen some of the nice communities, they have a banner that they put up, say taxes are due, and
I'm one of those.
you gotta
weird-
do whatever you can to bring the money in, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm one of those weird residents as a millennial. It's weird. I actually like to get my paper bills because everything gets flooded in
Yeah.
an email, and I don't love to set up
You're still gonna
everything
get the
online.
bill, you're just gonna have to remember to save a portion for.
Yeah, it's fine. Well, thank you.
Your calendar.
Council Foa.
Could you add one piece of paper to your semi-annual billing without increasing the postage?
We have the little postage, the little flyer that we send out asking for donations to help the seniors and the
pink-
disabled. So that's already at my max. I did look into it, and to add anything else, it's gonna up the postage. I physically went to the post office with all my envelopes and everything, and then weigh one, like to compare one against the other. And
Way to do it.
I cannot add anything else to the bill at this point unless we increase the postage.
thank you.
And the council should also be aware that there is an upfront cost with doing this. So there's very likely, whether it be next week or the communication after that, a request for funding related to a new printer. So just with the existing printers, they're not actually capable of doing the front and back at this high volume. So while there's significant operational savings, there will likely be a few $1,000s up front for a new printer. That's something you'll probably see before you shortly. So I just want to give you a heads up when you see that. That is actually directly related to the effort here.
So, I cut Zaida's postage last year. So if you actually went backwards to 23, it was a little bit higher than she got in 24, and she's a little bit above that. I saw the look, Zaida, when she came in.
And she needs more money at this point.
Yeah,
I know, I'm always, every year.
but it was a year of transition. We were really hopeful that some of the implementation stuff with the new version of Munis that we're in was going to come earlier in fiscal '24, and that we'd realize some of that savings. It's been a little bit of a challenge, and it's getting there. One of the offices that was most dramatically impacted by the Munis upgrade was Zaida's. It's been a real lift for her this year. So I live in a community that uses Munis and does do the semi-annual bills due quarterly for taxes. It works out. It is something that the first year you kind of looked at the bill and said, what's this? But it's pretty straightforward, and I'm pretty confident that folks will be able to manage that. And like Zaida said, the vast majority of the people who have real estate tax bills, it's being paid by one of the three major clearinghouse services, right? So there's a small percentage in with social media and the Kayla, I don't know
Yes.
the job title.
Yeah, she posts it on Facebook.
Yeah,
And,
there's lots of outreach on social media, and then, the council could always be kind enough to make the reminder of like, hey, the August 1st bills, November 1st bills, we could prompt you to remind folks. Maybe you don't want to remind them, but it's important to get the word out so people don't miss it and end up having late penalties and stuff. But, so I appreciate the efforts that you went through to get that done this year. It's not
Thank
easy.
And so can you remind us when it's time to sort of start spreading that word to remind the public
Sure,
about
I
getting
guess.
that word out?
Sure.
yes.
Thank
I
you.
can communicate that to the mayor's office and then they'll, yes.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Perfect.
Welcome.
I'm moving my slide up. I'm like, am I next? I don't know.
Yes.
I'm ready.
Yes. I'm not ready though.
So on the year-to-date, I think the library's at the back because the schedule got shifted a little bit. So in that packet, I think it's at the back.
Library's at 113.
And then in your budget book,
I think that's
Page
what you're
113.
talking about.
Whenever you're ready, Amy.
Sure. I look forward to your questions. This is my third time as director being in front of the council with the budget. With the help of Mason and Deb, and I have a phenomenal staff member in my business office that helps put our numbers together to make our request. I'm very comfortable. I think of Rick Conti, I think it was 2 years ago, saying, you run a tight ship over there. And I think that all of us at the library are very conscious of the fact that not only are most of us taxpayers, but we are in charge of taxpayer money, and we want them to get the best value for their dollar. And I understand this is coming from the director of the library, but I think we do a phenomenal job. We work really hard to meet the community where they are and to give them what they want. So, that being said, I mean, I could go on, but
Very much level funded. Council Waterman?
Well, as level funded as you probably are, what impacts your budget the most in terms of something this year that may not have been so much in the last few years? Is there anything?
Sure, we added a security detail to the budget this year. It is a last resort. We are trying, since the budget request went in, we're trying a few other things in the city, but we want that there. We've had a really, really challenging year with very needy patrons, harassing staff, giving the staff a hard time, and we need to stop that. Mm-hmm. Other than that, our city budget, and we have 3 parts to our budget. The general funds, our trust budget, and state funds, and what we get from the city can potentially affect what we get from the state. If we don't get it's a 2.5 increase based on the last 3 years, we lose money in state aid. Currently, we are docked 12.5%, which came to $14,000 this year because we're not open enough hours for a city of our size. The state says we should be open 59 hours, and we're open 56. The state also says that we need to spend 13% of our city budget on materials. All of that money doesn't need to come from the city budget, and it does come from trust, it comes from state aid, it comes from grants, it comes from the Friends. So we do have to watch that number to make sure that we hit it so we don't get docked further.
Councilor Foley?
How much would it cost to be open those additional hours?
A very, very rough estimate is probably $38,000 or $39,000, which would be 6 staff members for 4 hours for a year.
Right.
53 weeks, just to be safe.
Councilor Tavares?
So to Councilor Fo's point, for some of these areas where the library might get docked net-wise, would some of those make sense to sort of spend more to get more, or would there be more of a capital sort of outlay to sort of get there with some of these things? I'm sure that's sort of like a strategic analysis.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the library director, and so yes, I think that Attleboro deserves a library that is open and that's the minimum hours. So currently, we're open 8:30 to 8:30, 2 nights a week, 8:30 to 4:30, 2 nights a week, and then 12:30 to 8:30 on Thursdays. So that not being open Thursday mornings, like it's kind of a joke in the building because there's literally 8 to 10 people out there waiting as we're coming in. And then literally the crowds come in as we're unlocking the doors and we're like, positions everybody. And people get frustrated and even 8:30 on weeknights. People our building is used so much for meetings, programs. Like we don't have enough room to do all the meetings that we have, and then we're pointing at the clock, kicking them out at 8:30. It's so early. So.
And that was one of the things that jumped out to me. I don't know if people saw the number at 350 visitors per day on average.
On average, for the spring fling was Saturday, the 20th in the rain. We had 446 people through the doors on that Saturday. The day of the eclipse, we had an eclipse party with the Y in Balfour Park. The day of the eclipse, it was 550 odd folks in the building every day. Of every age, needing every different sort of thing. I think we included in the summary, like we did 444 programs last calendar year. Some of them are virtual, but the bulk of them are in person. We're doing, since the pandemic, we've really worked hard to bring people back into the building and back together. We've had phenomenal success getting like a bingo night, a karaoke night in the library, which is the craziest thing and not my idea, but very popular. Puzzle races where they compete to do a jigsaw puzzle first. Like the amount of people that come together, it's heartening and sort of makes up for the struggles that we have, I would say.
That's great. So what in here is missing? This is level funded. So first of all, what in here is missing? And second of all, where we didn't have a chance with the capital improvement tours to come visit the library, one of the things on there was the carpets. Can you talk a little bit about that need, just briefly? I know that's a little bit off topic, but.
Nope,
you just-
carpets
yeah.
are desperately needed. We just had the renovation, so all of the leaks that were happening in the building previous to the roof, like the carpet was soaking sopping wet. We know there's mold in there, and staff is very well aware how awful it is. It's hard to walk by that every day. And we're looking into other options, like does the library need to be carpeted all of the time? And then there's, since this carpet was put in, I believe in the 90s, they do it differently, right? There's tiles, you can replace small portions instead of the whole thing. I mean, I've been told that doing the carpet is a very big.
Okay, and I think that was 200,000?
Yes.
I think that was roughly the estimate that was on the
That's the
capital
rough
improvement book.
estimate.
So what else is missing from here? And then I'll hand it over to Deb for anything else she has.
I mean, to be clear, there was a part-time, it's called the library page position, which is a vacant position right now that the administration recommended not renewing the funding for. It's a position we think there's potential for volunteers, senior tax abatement volunteers.
We've got 2 working already.
To kind of fill the needs of that. It's I mean, from my perspective, it's a lot of book stocking, some other administrative duties that I think we believe that can be covered through volunteers and existing staff, and thought the security services was a bigger priority at this point, in kind of mitigating some of the difficult things they've been dealing with over the library the last couple of years.
Councilor Lavoie, then Councilor Tavares.
Thank you. I know when we had talked before about the issue at the library that you kind of mentioned with security, do you see, and you had mentioned it a little bit, that's why I wanted to touch on it, do you see the need for better, like surveillance cameras within the library, things of that nature? I know you mentioned several areas where you really have no view on, and probably a good reason why security's needed alone. So
We actually just this week purchased some Simply Safe cameras using state aid money. We had gotten a quote for hardwired cameras. It was a lot. So we're trying a much less expensive system that we think we can get better photos.
Councilor Tavares.
Yeah, my question on the security is that bringing in an outside company or is that just? Okay.
Outside company, yeah. I mean, I'm scary and can do that with nothing, but,
Deb.
Mason, I should have brought it up with Council on Aging here, but clearly library's a building. Can you speak a little bit to how you funded lights and power, where you are with that kind of stuff? Heat, I can see some increases in that kind of stuff. Obviously, there's increases throughout all utility costs across the board. If you could touch on that. And then just for everybody else's information, the library is eligible for and does receive funding through Universal Service Administrative Company, and their budget has a couple of lines in the budget that we also receive the grant funding. It's commonly referred to as E-rate money. That E-rate money would be a local receipt on the other side, but this budget does include those expenses in it. And 60% of the revenue, 60% of the cost of those will be covered by revenue streams that come into the general fund. So, just so you know.
Okay.
So specifically on lights and power, you'll see in this budget, compared to the revised in '24, a significant increase. That's something that you guys have been dealing with on a monthly basis, just rolling increases. I think heating across the city budget is an issue we're facing, and really we just got some increases on the supply side in the last couple. I think it was about a week or two ago, where we were quoted basically a 40 over 40% increase. And that's specifically on the supplier side, so it's not the full cost of heating. It hits like a certain percentage, but you'll see increases in heating budgets across the board, except in cases where we've looked and we've done an evaluation on actually maybe we have some surplus in those over the years, and we think we're going to potentially be able to get by, but it's something the council should be aware of is, over the next 6 months, as we get a better idea of those July 1 increases, that it may be possible that there's going to be additional, funds related to utilities. That might be something we have to come back for. It's a moving target at this point. Building maintenance costs as a whole, you see here an increase to the elevator costs. They've actually been dealing with an issue where when the power goes out, they have to get the elevator company out to the site to essentially
$800. So we call it the $800 call. Somebody has to come out and restart the elevator because of the new safety precautions to restart the elevator. Like, we can't touch the box.
And so we're looking at hopefully trying to address that in another way.
Yep.
But as of right now, this is kind of, we believe the 10,000 in there is kind of on track to what potentially could come up based on what's happened this year. And unfortunately, those costs are kind of going up across the board just for those professional services.
What if somebody's in the elevator?
Knock on wood, that hasn't happened. If it gets,
Sorry.
someone gets trapped in the elevator, the fire department gets the call and takes care of it. But yeah, restarting the elevator is a big deal. And last summer, we lost power like 3 times in a 2-month span, so it's a little bit of a hot button issue.
And then additionally, on building maintenance, so last year, one of the initiatives in the 24 budget was to separate out some of the expenses. So as the city continues to evaluate a citywide building department or contract for services, we have a better idea of what our costs for HVAC are, what our costs for fire suppression systems are, various services, plumbing. So that's continued in this budget. It's still, again, we have only about a year of data at this point. There's some pieces where I think we shifted some additional things this year. You'll see some other lines. That's kind of a continued process, but same principle in the 24 budget applies in the 25 budget.
Perfect.
Say one thing.
Guts of water.
So, to continue on maintenance. So, you had an original appropriation of $14,000 that we had budgeted, where $1,057 has been spent. And another maintenance of $8,600, originally at $876 expended. My hope is that we are keeping that building maintained. We lost out because when we had to practically rebuild the building in many ways, and that's not so long ago.
So, Councilor, what you'll also see there is those were also transfers out of that account. So part of accounting for these, these expenses in kind of appropriate individual accounts, there was actually funds transferred out of that maintenance account. So you're looking at the 14,000, 12,855 was transferred out to other account items. So I think overall in the building maintenance, this is an increase to their budget because this is also funding some of those other line items independently.
Okay.
So just to clarify.
As long as it's being handled.
Anything else?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Last year, we tried to carve out certain expenditures so that we'd be able to, at the end of this year, do a report on HVAC services. So we kind of know across the general fund what we're spending on that. So in the original appropriation, in fiscal '24, we didn't know which lines those would go to. So that's happening throughout the year. This year, we added police details, which so far, none of the budgets that you've seen that line in. Historically, police details have been in I think we did 3, police detail, fire detail, and laborers detail.
Correct.
Historically, those have been all lumped into a professional service line, so we couldn't call out that detail easily without looking at other reports. And it's in interest to try to be a little bit more transparent and to, really see what we're spending certain money on. Last year, we did legal. Like all legal expenses got carved out into their own line, HVAC, plumbing, elevators, electrical. This year we did police detail, fire detail, laborers detail, and we did IT subscriptions, which that's gonna be a little bit of a work in progress throughout the year, but there's some new GASB requirements, and it would be easier on a go-forward basis for us to carve that out on a unique object line, so we'll see all that kind of stuff. Makes it a little difficult in the year of transition for that stuff to follow it, but 2 years out, it will be a lot easier, and then as we go forward, we'll have better and better historical data so that we can see, you know, what are we really spending money on easily, so we can make some more informed decisions in the future about what's the most appropriate use of funds.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it.
Outstanding. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
We are ahead of schedule.
Great. All right, I will see you at the library.
Half my day there today. 7:42. 43.
Should be page 43 of your budget book.
Whenever you're ready, and
All
welcome.
right, so, thank you. The assessor's budget is, like most others, pretty much level funded, except for contractual increases this year. Everything really is pretty much status quo. I'm trying to think of anything, any major changes. But again, it's all just contractual. Our vision camera went up a little bit, and that's the camera software that we need to, we do our mass appraisal on. Generates all of our property record cards, so we need that. Other than that, straightforward.
One thing that it would probably be helpful for the council to know is, in the debt service line, the reevaluation. So this number can fluctuate based on if it's a full reevaluation or let's say it's called a partial.
Right, so, yeah, this is just an interim adjustment. The next full certification year is 2027, which will be budgeted in 2026. So next year, we'll be budgeting for a full certification, so a full measure and list.
And we could be looking at like 200,000 for something like that. So
Yes.
just something, you know, you might see that, you're gonna see that number next year, and it's a big difference in the budget. So just something you should be aware of, you know, for going forward. Maybe, is that every three to five?
It's every 5 years
5.
now. It was 3, it's 5 now.
Can you explain what you're just discussing? I don't understand it.
So
Don't know about it.
every year, we value property, we do sales analysis, and we have to be within 10% of full fair cash value for every piece of property in the city. Every 5 years, the Department of Revenue will come in and they certify our values. So they'll check all of our reports, all of our analysis. There are many different types of analysis, you know, they'll look at just the land, they'll look at just the structures, they look at everything. And they certify our values.
And how is that related to this inspect each property within a 10-year cycle? Is that,
Cyclical inspections are done on an ongoing basis, and we are required to have viewed, inspected each property on a 10-year cycle, on a 10-year basis. So every 10 years, each property should have been viewed, visited by us. That's a cyclical inspection. So that's one of the things the Department of Revenue will look at when they come in for our certification. We have to be at a certain point in our cyclical inspections to get certified.
thank you.
Just could you speak to a couple of things? So there was a supplemental appropriation, so to speak, this year, additional funds for the personal property?
Yes.
So you're doing interims for the personal property with an outside firm? And then, Julie, is it in the GIS services with the flight where you can see the properties, and that came in last year, the year before, and has that actually proven beneficial and helped you pick up anything?
Yes,
Could
that's,
you elaborate on what that is, because there's new counselors?
sure, yep. Near map, that really came into play during COVID, when we couldn't go out and do inspections. and it came in as a tool that we could use in the office to view properties. Of course, we can't get in there, but that, along with the information we can find on MLS, helped us to do these cyclical inspections and other sales inspections that we're required to do. And it helps us to find, you know, if somebody put on an addition without a permit. We get a lot of our information from the building department. When someone pulls out a building permit, we get a copy of it, so we know that there's been a change to a property. That's the basis for our evaluations, is having good data. So that really helps us get good data. It's been beneficial not only to my office, but I think to many other offices in the city. Other departments are utilizing it as well. I know the police use it, Public Works uses it. So I think it's been good for a lot of different departments. The RRC personal property inspections, we're bringing in an outside vendor to do them. I really think it's going to be beneficial, although, you know, my office is fantastic. I like to think, you know, my staff is great. We can't do everything. This company will come in and they literally go to each and every business in the city and will count the tables, count the chairs, count all of their personal property. And I'm hoping that this will really be beneficial for us. I think it will. We'll see a good, go ahead.
So just so everybody understands, a key component of the overall financial picture in the levy, there's growth, and some of what Julie is talking about today is what foundationally helps growth, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
So it's a key component to the puzzle, so.
Right, and personal property is something that's always changing. Businesses are leaving, new businesses are coming in, and especially, you know, with what, we had a big development down at 228 Washington Street, those businesses, a lot of them came in, and quite frankly, yeah, we haven't been able to just get out there, like I said, count tables, count chairs, the way we really need to. I think it'll, and on top of that, the Department of Revenue changed the way utilities need to be valued. They're gonna help with that. I mean, we had it done during the certification year, but they're gonna update it for us, so that'll be beneficial too.
It just helps explain it, I know.
It's getting it from here to here. It's
No,
the
it's
problem.
it helps explain the overall picture that will become important to the counselors, you know, at the public hearing when we talk about revenue. Like, it's important, what you do is really important, and the regression analysis and the data and all the stuff that you put into it, it's important that people at least have a little bit of exposure to that, so.
And so there was a lot of talk recently regarding cell towers and analysis and reevaluating cell towers. Can you speak at all towards that? Is that done now, or is there anything further going on there?
So that company came out and did the updates to it. I've been maintaining it again through building permits, so I know when a cell company comes in and they make a change to any of their equipment on the tower, they pull a building permit for it, and I'll update the account. But that was very helpful. They went out, took pictures of all of the equipment on all of the towers, and so we were able to update that, and we match it up to the form of list. Companies, businesses in the city also are required to file a form of list. So they're required to file a listing of all of the equipment they have at their location. And so it was a double check. They were able to find some things that the companies weren't listing, and now I'm maintaining that, so.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And does that end up going under personal property, or is that just?
That's personal property,
Okay,
yes. Yeah.
perfect. Good to know. And then can you talk a little bit about, in 2024, you list began implementation of the digitization plan for all deeds, plans, and property related documents. So you started that work. How's that going?
It's going really well. We're scanning everything in. We're in the process of scanning even the backlog of plans that we have in our office. Almost everything, we can now hop on the computer, type in the map and lot number, and everything that we have pertaining to that property is starting to come up, which is huge. You know, it's so much easier. It really is making things a lot more efficient.
And so are there costs now associated that we should be seeing with MIS tied to anything further, with sort of maintaining that or increasing, or is that something we should be seeing increasing or expanding?
I think that might be reflected in your increase in your software line.
Is that included?
Some of it, but really, we're doing all of the work ourselves, and whether or not MIS is gonna need to put us on a bigger server at some point, that could be. I don't know how much room they have.
Yeah, in terms of, I mean, in general, the more we move towards like a digital infrastructure, and you know, we're gonna have a need for increased capacity. That's something, you know, there's certain services in our updated Munis that we're evaluating right now, and they require an additional server, for example. So there is infrastructure often associated with the, you know, the new software or just increased records. So that is something. I mean, again, it's possible that I don't know if that would appear in the annual budget, as it might be something we look at a capital expense. But as we continue to kind of increase that capacity, it is something to keep an eye on.
Okay. Perfect. I don't have anything else. Anyone else? Outstanding.
Okay.
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Elections.
Should be on page 61 of the budget book.
61.
Good
Welcome.
evening, thank you. Yeah, so this is my first budget. And I
Whenever
think
you're ready.
Yeah, I think the elections budget's pretty straightforward.
Yep.
I found some places we could cut things, quite a bit actually. There were large equipment purchases last year, which would make up the bulk of the difference. That being said, my salaries election is a little bit rough this year because it's a state election year. So we are mandated to do early voting for a week prior to the state primary and 2 weeks prior to the state election. We also have to have more poll workers, more police on duty. The police also got an increase, so that's all taken into consideration in the budget. Other than that, you know, we use 2 schools as polling locations now, so we save on rental fees. Yeah. We had some equipment that was being leased and not really utilized, so I cut that from the budget to a tune of about $3,000. And then as far as staffing goes, I used about 7 COA tax abatement workers this past election to do stuff in the office and help us with the census. I have another 7 coming in starting in July. To help us out. So that's going to ease a little bit of a payroll burden, I think. In addition to that, I have 2 interns coming from the high school over the summer, 30 hours a week each for the month of July, and they are being paid from YouthWorks. It's a mass hire program, so the state's paying them. So free help. So yeah. I mean, other than that, you know, I cut where I could cut for sure, and everything else is pretty necessary. Vote by mail is a lot. You know, we'll probably send out 6,000 ballots for September and over 10,000 for November, and it could be more. So that has taken the burden from the polling locations into the office, hence the need for overtime and so forth. So, yeah, but...
It's probably helpful for the council to know too. Elections is a budget that can shift a decent amount year to year based on the number of elections and the type of elections. You know, one of the things we discussed is sort of a kind of a good rule of thumb is even calendar year, state pays some of the costs. Odd calendar year, it's more cost to the municipality. So this being the election in November, obviously being an even calendar year, there's some costs that are kind of
Yeah, the
shifted
state
off.
pays for the ballots on state election years, and that's like a $10,000 expense per election. So on municipal election years, that's on the city. So that's good. They also pay for the vote by mail postcards to go out to every registered voter, which is just over 35,000 now, and that's expensive. I also I cut that cost because next year I'm going to send the application that we would be responsible to send with the census. So that will go to every household. So the city won't have to spend $12,000 to do a mailing. So we're doing that as well.
Councilor Angela?
Thank you, Councilor Cobus. Thanks for coming, appreciate it. I think it was a couple of years ago, we appropriated a new position in your department before you got there and everything. Can you explain how that's worked out? Because there was a little bit of going back and forth back at the time when we were doing it. Is it needed? Is it not needed? But I saw it, me personally, I saw it as being needed because of the fact that everything that was changing with the elections and the write-in ballots and everything else. But maybe you can explain to that how that's worked out.
Yeah, no, so it's worked out well. And in fact, especially before elections and during massive, we have to stuff all the ballots. We have to stamp all the ballots. We have to mail all the ballots. Then we get all the ballots back in. We have to file them. We have to account for them. We have to open them. It's all on us. Of just even 3 of us, it's not really enough. That's why I bring in part-timers and volunteers and so forth. But yeah, it's not a seasonal office anymore. I think back in the day, before 2016, before there was early voting, before 2020 when there was vote by mail, elections probably had a lot of lulls and it was just like a couple times a year it was a little busy. It's all year now. Because if we're not stuffing ballots, we're entering vote by mail applications, we're processing census forms. It's just always going. So.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm good. I think it's true that budgeting for multiple elections and then on the alternate years when you have to potentially plan for a primary at the city and if it doesn't happen, this is one of those budgets that kind of ebbs and flows and in a lot of respects you do the best you can with the forecasts. I think the high-speed tabulators and that forecasting to save you a little bit of
so I think it was back in FY23, City Council agreed to pay $5,100 for just one election for us to lease it to do advanced depositing. And it basically is like a high-speed copier that just feeds the ballots through, reads them, rather than 20 seconds per ballot. At any rate, so the state came in with a program where they are paying our lease for us to have it all 3 elections. So this past March 1 and then September and November, no charge to us. So that $5,100 back to the city. And at the end of the year, we will buy that out for $3,500. And so instead of spending $51 per election, we get to own a $25,000 piece of equipment for $3,500.
Oh, that's great.
It's really great, and it's awesome. It's it speeds things up and it helps because when we have to feed 10,000 ballots through a tabulator, we can do it with 2 people over the course of 2 days instead of 10 people over the course of a week, maybe, if we're lucky, so.
And I have to just say, I was really impressed working with Sharon and kind of her approach to coming in is let's see where we can save. It's like every conversation was, well, I took a look at this account and I don't know why we're doing this and I think we should do this instead. And I thought that was like a really impressive and enlightening approach. So I just wanted to say that, and I think that's reflected in this budget request. A lot of those changes that Sharon's implemented are reflected here, and I think there's a benefit to those.
I agree with. Thank you. I agree with that. I mean, just something that sounds so small about sending the applications with the census is huge. I mean, that's a lot of money. And that's great.
Yeah, last year the postcard mailing was $12,000 plus $3,200 in postage. So just put it with the census that's going anyway. So
no, it's perfect.
That's the plan. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Thank you.
Mars?
This is just a clarification comment slash question that hopefully you can just confirm. Because there tend to be a lot of questions around voting by mail, right? Especially since that's been sort of new the last several years. And just for the benefit of those in the city, this is not really an option we have as a city, right? This is a state mandate.
Well, for the state elections, it is mandated. As a municipal election, the commissioners could opt out by, if they vote, but it's kind of silly to do so because everyone's already at that point signed up for it, maybe for the year. And the municipal election, I think we sent out 1,000 ballots. It's like a whole different thing. We can handle that after this, So, but yeah, the state, we have no choice. Municipal, we could opt out if the commission voted to do so. But, I think people have really relied on it. There's no more 1 a.m. nights at the polls. Early voting is diminishing a bit, and we're looking at staffing for that and seeing what we might be able to do differently. So, yeah.
Anything else? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Do you want me to read this or do you-
I can take it.
Right on schedule.
Page go.
65.
Page 65 and
Oh, big cuts here every year.
then. Yeah, you're good. It's a tough budget, huh?
Sorry.
No, don't worry. It is what it is, Council Cobus.
Sorry. Welcome. Whenever you're ready. And I very much appreciate what you do for the city.
Thank you. Try
Yeah,
hard.
I very much appreciate everything you do for the city.
I'm trying very hard to keep our exposure limited with the city council when it comes to funding. Vast majority of the projects we scour state and federal grants to fund what we need to do, and in those special occasions where I just can't find anything, I do come to the council, but I do try to very, very hard with my staff to limit that exposure of the city to a lot of the $100,000, sometimes multi-million-dollar projects that we administer that we don't come to the council. I do come every so often for a match, a cash match, but those instances when I do come for the appropriation, I sincerely appreciate the support that you give us and give us those funds. So, much like my predecessors, pretty much a level of funding, salaries are salaries. You will notice a reduction in account number 513000 for overtime, from about 4,400 down to, I think it's 3,200. And the reason for that is, unfortunately, we lost a staff member. Went out to greener pastures about 9 months ago. She was with me for about a good 10 years, and as a result of her salary. So let me first talk about the overtime. That is strictly for the planning administrator. That is strictly for overtime at planning board meetings and zoning board meetings. So I never use that overtime account for any other staff member to work after 4:30 on any project. It is strictly for meetings. Having said that, the planning administrator, when she attends the planning board and zoning board meetings, because the predecessor was here for a good 10 years, her salary was high, so, and because it's time and a half, it's a higher number. So the new person started at step 1. So that's reflective of that salary. So that's why there's such a, yeah, it's about $1,000, but it is savings. Next item, longevity. Again, it is what it is. It went down again also because that staff member who would have been for her 10th anniversary, she's no longer here. So that longevity number is for myself and my only other staff member at this point that's over that time, 10 years, is the senior land use planner. So that just reflects our longevity. And I think that's it under my 5-1 account. I guess one item I do want to talk about under my salary account, the 511,000. So a portion of that for one of my staff members, the assistant conservation agent, his salary is funded 50% by the city. It's a full-time position. We increased that from a part-time to a full-time approximately 2 or 3 years ago. And the agreement was, as we elevated it from a part-time to a full-time, was how best we could fund that position. So what we came up with was that the city would pay 50% for the city side of the ledger, and that the Conservation Commission would appropriate the other 50%. That worked well for the last couple of years. I was really concerned whether or not we would be able to meet that 50% this year, but I think we're going to make that, so we will. I guess if there's anything that I could tell the council for future planning as far as this is, we might have to, I don't know right now, because permits could go up again. So right now, the funding source for my 2505 account and 2509 account is strictly from permits. One is the Wetlands Protection Act, which is 2505. The other is the Local Wetlands Protection Ordinance, which is 2509. No funding from any stormwater permits go into the department. Those all go right into the general account. So my 2505 and 2509, I believe we'll have enough money to fit that 50%. I don't, unless things pick up, or if we continue on the same trajectory right now, I just want to tell the council, just to put you on alert, that we might not be able to hit that 50% next year. And at that time, I would respectfully say we'll just agree to meet at that time to see if we could respectfully adjust that percentage. But one of the objectives that I told the council, why should we go to 50%, is I rely a lot on my conservation agent, my environmental planner. And one of the rationales was I needed to bring him in, as I do with the senior land use planner, a lot more intimate with what I'm doing with project management. In order to do that, I needed Mr. Wiley to start delegating more of his work to the assistant conservation agent. And he has, and I will tell you, it's made an effect on my ability to concentrate more on policy and often in the weeds, where I was finding it difficult and ponderous to keep up, but I always did. But it's nice to have someone else I could lean on. And I will say thank you for increasing it to a full-time position, because I do feel the difference of my workload and my ability to converse with staff who's speaking with me on the same terms. And I don't have to wait for somebody to give him something, wait a couple of weeks to get him acclimated, and then to come back to me, where I could just have that conversation as we need. So it is a critical part, is having a full-time assistant, because that person takes the load off Nick, who then can work with me, and it kind of evens out things in the office. So moving forward, I just wanted to say that to you, because that was the rationale, and that should the revenue stream for my permits that come through Concom, again through the 2505 and 2509, maintain the trajectory right now, we might have to change that equation for next year. 60, 40, 70, I don't know right now, but I think we're good for this year. And I'll be working with Mason and the city auditor on that, and then request the appropriate transfer from the Conservation Commission prior to the end of fiscal year '24 to supplement that account so I can hit the ground running on July 1st.
Deb, is that something that we can just shift? Just, I
So-
don't want to say arbitrarily, but like, is that,
So this was, the position was taken on under the previous administration and the previous budget director. I said at that time, we were not gonna be able to sustain the portion coming out of the special revenue funds, which are the two funds that Gary's talking about. You were able to do it for, I believe, 2 years from the notice of intent fund?
Yes, 2505, right?
2 years from the notice of intent fund. For fiscal '25, the shift is going to be from those two funds that Gary talked about, because the NOI fund, notice of intent fund, doesn't bring in enough revenue to sustain that position. It is not just, unless there's something dramatically different that happens, a greater portion of that would have to come from the levy and the general fund budget beginning in 2026. The year-to-date revenues in the two funds combined that Gary was just mentioning are only on the order of $9,000. So what's happening, the use of those funds, it's being depleted from having built up over time. So the short answer to your question though is yes, right? If it's a position that's warranted and the city wants to sustain it in a go-forward basis, then Mason would have to figure out where is he gonna put it in the budget? What do we, if we have an additional revenue source, then we'd have the way to pay for it. If we don't, something else goes, right? So that's why we pay him, to figure that out. And he's figured it out for 2026, the meaningful answer to 2025, right? Like, what do we do this year? And the budget, this budget, as I understand it, presents the position continued to be funded, 50% of the salary coming from the general fund, fringe benefit coming from the general fund, the notice of intent and the local wetlands funds to share the other 50% of the salary line at the discretion of the Conservation Commission, which is the vote Gary was talking about.
So, long story short, over time, if this position remains a full-time position, basically, you'll see an increase in the general fund share. Or, again, if there's another, as Deb said, if there's another revenue source that comes in, then it could be shifted somewhere else. But it's not like I think to answer your question more directly, it is a matter of more of an administrative decision saying what funds we want to access, subject to the vote of, in this case, Conservation Commission.
I just want to do the responsibility and just put on your radar screen today, so.
Yeah, absolutely.
thank you.
And it's an allowable use of the two funds that Gary's talking about. We evaluated to make sure that this is an appropriate and allowable use of those funds to pay for a portion of this position. So,
And it's likely valuable to also mention, at the same time, there's also positions in this department's budget that are funded through CDBG. And so if, there's sort of thresholds within the CDBG budget of what an administrative threshold for those kind of costs. They also are allowed to essentially charge the CBDG funds on a performance basis based on projects. So that's how they are able to cover those salaries at 100%.
That aren't part of this
that's
budget.
not part of this.
That's not part of this
Right,
budget.
it's not part of this
Yeah, it's
budget,
not
but the
part-
personnel within your department.
Right.
And so my point is, if over time, it may be that the city has to evaluate if those are going to be 100% funded by CDBG, or is there also going to be some sort of split differential there as well.
But as of right now, moving forward into FY '25,
They're fully-
per the presentation that Ms. Brissette did for the council last month in this budget, 100% of the salaries for the CD staff that's under my umbrella comes out of the block grant. None of that's reflected in here.
The concept is the same as to what Mason has done this year with formula, right? They evaluated in the Council on Aging department, where do we best appropriate or charge, what should we do? And in that circumstance, they shifted from the general fund to a grant. In this circumstance, right now, we're split between the general fund, two special revenue funds, and at some point in the future, it's more likely than not that they're going to come back. To Gary's point, right, if there's significant application fees, a greater share could be absorbed by those special revenue funds. Unless the trend changes, it's going to go to the general fund if we're going to continue to support the position.
That makes sense. Thank you. Did that make sense to everybody else? Everybody's
Clear.
Okay, we carry on.
go ahead.
The next one would be 530173, the NIPD's contract. That is, NIPD's, the National Pollution Discharge and Elimination System permit. That was enacted circa 2001. We issued our first permit in 2002. We renewed that permit around 2016. We are required by federal law, an unfunded federal mandate, to, what does it mean, is to identify and eliminate illicit discharges to our municipal stormwater system. The whole program actually falls under the National Clean Waters Act. It's unfunded. To this date, we've probably administered annually, I want to say, at least under my department, about 10 of these annual contracts, if not more, and they fluctuate from year to year, depending on whatever the requirements are from the federal government for that given year. So the contract we're under currently, that the council appropriated last year, it's $153,500. Yep, which aligns with last year's budget, and this year's contract is for $154,500. That's 100% consultant fees that we oversee in the department. The consultant is Horsley Witten Group. They do a phenomenal job. We're lucky we have them. And again, it's to administer the unfunded mandate of identifying those illicit connections. Every so often, councils will receive a letter from my office signed by myself and the environmental planner, Mr. Wiley, letting you know that in particular neighborhoods, the engineers will be out in the field knocking on doors for one of two reasons. Either just to let you know we're here and don't get scared if you see us walking around. And then sometimes, depending on what they might detect, they may ask to come inside, but we want to let into someone's home, but we want to let you know in advance, at least 2 months ahead of time, that we're doing that in a particular area. I think we send it out to all the councils for that matter, not just necessarily the immediate area, just so that if you get a telephone call, you'll be prepared to understand, this is the connection, as opposed to, let me find out from Gary and Nick and then call up, this way you'll be prepared. But again, this is going to be ongoing for the next easily 10, 15 years. So then we have other items here that, I don't know if you want me to necessarily get into. 501347, those are budget items for consultants on projects I'm working on. There's one for $41,000, $45,000, $35,000. Then, of course, then there's the SPAC 5-year landfill. Again, that's a operation and maintenance plan of the SPAC landfill, a former Superfund site on the Attleboro-Norton line. Nick and I, again, administer that appropriation. We have a company, ERM, that oversees and does the work for us. And again, that's another contract that just fluctuates from year to year.
But those aren't in the 25 budget.
No, I'm just
to be
saying,
clear. Yeah.
they're just on the list, so in case the council had any questions, I just want to address them, but those aren't in the actual budget, those were already budgeted last year. Office supplies, I requested $750. For some of the newer counselors, for the longest time, I used to get about $50 a year, but I was given $750. I would respectfully ask if we could hold on to that. Those are actually the only discretionary funds I think I have in my budget, so that's strictly office supplies, folks. You know, it's $750. You can only buy so many pens and pencils. Usually what that might go through is if a chair breaks and, you know, we need to spend $150 on a chair or something, but that we make stretch for the entire year, so, and we're pretty frugal with this.
That's where the cuts are gonna happen.
For $1,200 on the membership, again, I appreciate the appropriation for this. That's for the professional affiliation of myself and the senior land use planner with the American Planning Association. For years, we paid out of our own pocket. They always say it can't hurt to ask. A few years ago, I asked if this could come out of the city, and the answer was yes. I appreciate that. Aside from the membership fee for myself and the planner, and that's a function of salary, I think there's another couple of extra $100. I think it's maybe our memberships are $1,000. I asked maybe for an extra 150 or 200, which makes it the 12 for a subscription to say the PAS, which is the Planning Advisory Service, or to the Urban Land Institute. So every so often I just like to pick off something that piques my interest. But again, the entire figure is $1,200. And folks, I think that's it. As you see my narrative, this is the abridged version, right? I'll send you the unabridged version. I'm only joking. The reason why I just bring that up is what I said earlier is about how we try to limit our exposure to the council for funding. I'm just very happy to bring your attention to the number of projects we're working on that's all grant funded. So what I'll do, if it's okay, maybe I can forward that to the city councils just so you have an idea, because when you look at the budget, again, it seems most of it's, vast majority of it is the salary. Doesn't really explain to you all the different things we're working on. So, aside with the planning board, the zoning board, the conservation commission, of course, the CD office as well. But if it's okay with you, I'd like to forward that email, that document in an email. I'll send it to Virginia and have her share it with everybody. But it's a pretty long list of projects. All, again, vast majority funded 100% with grant funds. So, and Mr. Kovich, that's it. Unless there are any questions.
I just
Councilor
wanted to, you deserve a lot of credit for the work that you're undertaking. I found it particularly interesting that you're working to find more parking space downtown.
Yeah.
That was the question I had. Can you talk a little bit about the planned fiscal year 25 project? Working with business owner, municipal officials, business owners, as well as GATRA and the MBTA to increase on-street parking capacity in the downtown
I would
area.
love to. So, in one instance, I've already identified several off-street parking spaces on Railroad Ave from about where if you take, you've got from Bank Street, and you go down Railroad Ave, and then there's an angle in the street, if you may. From where that angle is all the way down to Mill Street, I've had an engineer draw out a plan where we could do angled parking, and it probably increases the capacity by about twofold. But I need to partner with the MBTA because of the wall and some other improvements we want to do on that side of Railroad Ave. You might say, well, so what, Gary? Well, I just got to stop picking out these little places all over the downtown to pick up on-street parking. That's one. There's a couple of other ones that the mayor and I, along with the Public Works Department, have identified for additional on-street parking. But the core of what I'm trying to work on is off-street parking. And I'm developing a scope of work that's going to assess the structural integrity of the parking garage on Sanford Street and Bank Street, and whether or not that structure could withstand the load of maybe another level or 2 levels. And if not, how much would it cost to shore up that building under existing conditions to accommodate a 3rd level or a 4th level? I'm also looking across the street to determine where the parking lot is, where the YMCA is to determine whether or not we could put a deck there, a parking deck. The other place we're also looking at is putting a deck, and this is something I've been talking about for some time is a parking deck on the municipal surface parking garage at North Main Street where the library is. That might have some interesting implications on the Balfour Riverwalk, which I think after 25, 30 years kind of needs a little facelift, but I don't want to complicate the matter and bring too much into it by trying to upgrade the Balfour Riverwalk with a parking project, but just on a standalone, those are just 3 areas we're looking at. Again, in this regard, actually getting a feasibility study to determine how much this is going to cost. So the zoning board every so often says, Gary, you know, as we approve these projects all over the downtown, we're peppering all these multifamily developments in the downtown, and often they come before the board as part of the approval process, the need for off-street parking. And often we ask that they speak with either a private developer that's allowed by the zoning ordinance, a private party, to find parking spaces within 300 feet of that property to lease spaces, and then to come to the board and say, look, I could accommodate 20 parking spaces here. Or they could speak with Mason for finding parking spaces within 1,000 feet of a municipal parking garage or a municipal parking facility. So lots of times, for one reason or another, we're able to accommodate that. And I've been recommending to the Board of Appeals to continue granting permits. And I always hear there's not enough parking in the downtown, not enough parking downtown. To be quite frank with you, in my humble opinion as the professional planner, I sometimes think that's more of a perception than a reality in this regard. Often you can't park right where you want to park, and if you got to walk several feet, a few car lengths someplace, it's an inconvenience. I was happy to see, if you recall, in that recent study that the Economic Development Director had prepared, Catherine Fierick, there were 4 takeaways in that mobility study that she had. And when I think I saw it was the 3rd bullet, I kind of yelled in my office with excitement that one of the conclusions was there actually is sufficient parking capacity in the downtown, albeit that it might not be in the most convenient location, and that during a peak time you might have to walk to a location. My point is, right through today, I recommend to the Board of Appeals to continue to allow these developments to occur in the downtown, whether they could accommodate the parking on-site or a portion off-site on a municipal parking lot, for example. But we're going to come to a point in a few years that that's all going to get actually saturated. So that's why we're taking this study on now, as soon as they get the scope done, to look at a lot of these areas in the downtown where we could accommodate additional off-street municipal parking, continue with the approvals of the downtown with the adaptive reuse of a lot of these municipal buildings in the downtown, so that when we get to a point 3 or 4 or 5 years down the line, that we could actually create the additional parking capacity. So we just keep moving forward instead of at that point 5 years from now saying, oh my God, we're behind the 8 ball, we can't accommodate any more development because we don't have any more parking. To take on that study now and then ultimately come before the municipal council, present those findings to you, and let's see where we get the funding for the to build those, so that we could just continue the evolution of our downtown with a lot of the nice, great things we're working on. For example, the TOD will be coming down pretty soon. So the last one, that the council appropriated funding for is the complete redesign and renovation of the municipal parking lot back here at Government Center. We're whole hog working forward on that one, and I'm hopeful that probably by the end of summer, early fall, that we'll probably have a preliminary plan to present to the city council. You know, we're going to get that vetted out by a lot of stakeholders. I also consider all the employees in City Hall stakeholders too, just to make sure that what we come up with, there's a few department heads and our consultant working on this collaboratively, and that's certainly going to create additional parking capacity. What we're doing on Railroad Avenue, a few other places with the mayor and the DPW on on-street parking, and those 3 large facilities, parking areas that I spoke about.
Councilor LaVoy?
May I comment on what was just mentioned? Or okay. I know you mentioned kind of looking at the off-property parking source. Just one comment from living in the Wall Street building is...
Which building?
Wall Street.
Wall Street.
One Wall Street.
Yeah.
For a while, people were paying the $90 a month to park in the MBTA lot. I don't remember when, but at one point we put the spaces on Wall Street, and immediately those are filled morning to night with residents of the building. So I just hate to see, good parking spots for businesses over there utilized by now residents who don't want to pay $90, so they fight for those spaces in the morning. Granted, there's no 3-hour parking limit or 2-hour parking limit, anything like that. Obviously, there's potential to do that, but just kind of something to keep in mind.
Sure. The only comment I can offer you for that is the Board of Appeals and the Planning Board, for that matter, we make sure that before they render a decision in the affirmative, that the parking is taken care of. Ultimately, where anyone wants to park is up to them. So we could create, for example, a new residential building, let's just call it 50 units with 50 parking spaces on that property. Nothing compels those people, the residents, to park there. If they want to park on the street, they can. So we can't tell as a condition of approval to say, okay, Gary, if you're going to live in that, you have to park there. You can park wherever you want. So in that case, I understand what you're saying. As long as the project that we approve provides for sufficient parking capacity, then it's up to the residents where they ultimately decide to park.
I more so would argue that, again, this is not, any direct person decision, but one space per unit seems low in modern times. Most people have multiple vehicles in every household, so, especially where we're adding 2 or 3 room apartments, so.
On the contrary, I actually think that the toggle should go the other way. My original recommendation of the council when we adopted the TOD back in the day was actually 0.8 parking spaces per unit. And the council at that time, and I think it was Councilor Conti, debated me ad nauseum on that he thought it should be much higher than that. So, we're part of what we're doing in the downtown with this TOD is the principle, again, with sustainability, climate change, is the principle of making it a walkable downtown and less reliance on the vehicle. And one way to do that is to start adopting a zoning ordinance, which we're going to be coming out to the council probably with some of the projects that are on this list that you funded, is starting to manifest that in our zoning ordinance to start moving that ship in that direction. So you might get rooms, you might get apartments with maybe 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms. That's not necessarily indicative that every one of those units are going to have 2 children. Some people create an office space in their second bedroom. So often we ask, how many bedrooms? Well, you're going to have so many studios, so many 1s, so many 2s, so many 3s. But there's no follow-up on our end then to find out of those 2s and 3s, how many actually are populated by households or families having 2 to 3 children. In fact, if you look at the statistics, especially in the Northeast, it's a document called the Birchall and Liskington document. I'll be happy to show you those. Is that the more you go away or stray from a single-family detached home, the fewer school-age children you get. And I'm not going to say that I know verse and poem the precise profile or percentage of those living in, say, Renaissance Station North or 1 Wall Street, but I'm thinking that working with the staff and what developers are providing for a product isn't necessarily just creating 2 and 3 bedroom units because of larger families. I think there are other ways that lots of folks are using that space other than for a bedroom. It could be for a guest bedroom, it could be for an office and your own bedroom. So I'm actually thinking, and we're going to be working toward actually reducing the minimum off-site parking requirements. But another debate to be had down the line.
I'll say it then, fitting that I'm in Councilor Conti's seat, former Councilor Conti's seat.
Any other questions?
I have,
Councilor Foer.
I have a question. People have said to me that they're scared to use the municipal garage. Sanford Street, is that where it is?
Correct.
Have you ever considered the costs of cameras, better lighting, that sort of thing, to improve the usage? Because it's not used much, as far as I can tell.
So I've heard that perception, and I've seen it, and it doesn't look a little scary. I do know that the city has spent, especially, I think, two predecessors ago from Mason.
So, well, if I can
Oh, go ahead,
interject,
you
so if
too.
I can interject, so parking is under my department. So if we want to, if
Oh,
I can
okay.
follow up, when my budget meeting is, and we can talk about the revolving fund, which is also before you, and we can talk about some of those pieces as well.
And it's probably of any update of that building, that issue would be taken up at that time. But I know we've spent money on that issue, though.
Love it. Any other questions?
No, we hit on what I wanted to earlier, so thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Thanks, Gary.
Pleasure, thank you. Thank you for having me, appreciate it.
Stuff is veterans and
That should be it.
There's a very high overtime in this department.
I mean, and now is the
They moved his time, that we moved his time?
Yeah.
Is it just a
Thanks, Gary.
It's playing. 4,500 he spent, 1,000.
Yes.
give him 5.
He doesn't
Moved
include
forward by
himself.
15 minutes.
What's that?
Ben moved forward by like 15 minutes, I thought.
So he
Is
should
that what
be
you
here,
asked?
yeah.
Yeah, I believe he knew he was
Yeah,
got
he's on at
shifted to
9 o'clock.
9. So
They, Virginia amended it today.
yeah.
Should have sent out notice.
So, move to recess for 5 minutes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are recessed for 5 minutes and
Quick 5 minutes.
I call the Finance Committee to order at 9:01. Welcome, Ben.
Hi, I'm late.
Nope, you are right on time.
I'm sorry. I apologize if I am.
We were a little bit early, and I was just going to recess for 5 minutes. But since you're here, we'll come back to order right away.
So
Welcome.
It's page 110 of your budget books.
Welcome, Ben.
Oh, thank you.
What page was it?
110.
110 is the narrative, and 112 is the budget.
110. See, we weren't even ready.
So the other departments have just given like a broad overview of their budget.
Sure, okay. Well, the biggest part of my budget is the Chapter 115. And that is something that we've been able to level going into the next year. And I think that's a reflection of a lot of things. It seems like, I've had unfortunately, some veterans or surviving spouses pass away, and they don't always get backfilled right away with new veterans. But at the same time, over the last 3 years, VSOs like myself across the state have been very diligent at the direction of the DVS to try to move veterans into other benefits, keeping in mind that Chapter 115 is a benefit of last resort. Okay, if there's any other state benefit that they're available to them, they must utilize it. So it's kind of like our job to go out and find these benefits, and then it's kind of put on me to make sure that I help the veteran or surviving spouse get on that benefit. So that does alleviate a lot of financial stress to the Chapter 115 budget as it relates to the city. The other budgets really were sufficient in the last year. I didn't see any reason to change any that I was able to stay within budget. That includes things like vehicle maintenance or flags. There actually were a couple budgets that I just wasn't utilizing as much, so I tried to draw from them. If I increased one budget, I tried to find the money somewhere else, because I really did want to become as level as last year as possible, and I think I was successful in doing that. And even like the parade budget, even though the cost of police details went up a little bit, I was able to get some of my other contributors, like floats and stuff, to not cost as much. So I was able to continue with the same budget for the Memorial Day Parade, which is, by the way, at the end of the month, and you're all invited. Hope to see you there. But I really should, I'm not a budget that should be costing more than this past year. I'm very level.
So I think some of the context too for the veteran aid, we had been looking at this throughout this current fiscal year with the increases in health insurance costs, as well as the reimbursement costs. We really thought we were going to see an increase, and ultimately I think we've kind of see, like you said, you unfortunately have had some kind of come off of those benefits and sort of those decreases. So initially you see in the requested the 600,000, but as we continue to look at, where we're headed, we're not really seeing an increase like that, and we expect a surplus in that account in 24, and so we feel pretty comfortable with the 550 in 25. But of course, we're gonna, on a monthly basis, we said we're gonna kind of review that together and make sure that we're not getting into a position come next April or May where all of a sudden we're worried about not having enough funds to meet those obligations.
Yeah, so each month I will monitor that one particular line item, the Chapter 115, and what I'll do is I'll give Mason just a percentage used each month, and I think we're hopeful and expecting to be able to come in, of course, under budget. But if I was for some unforeseen reason need to look for extra money for that Chapter 115, I hope to be able to do that very early, somewhere around the 6 or 7 month mark, to say that something's happened. I took on, say, a big family, and they're just costing me a lot of money, or I'm just whatever it is. I won't it won't be a surprise. It'll come in early, and I don't expect to have to, but if it does, then I'll make you aware of it much earlier in the fiscal year. So it won't be. It's not going to be at the end of the year.
So can I just ask 2 questions specific about Veterans Aid?
I'm sorry, about the what?
About the Veterans Aid line.
Sure.
So, because Chapter 115 is, as you said, the assistance of last resort, are you at all concerned of federal, state, other programs that people have been able to avail themselves of for the last couple of years that won't be available in 25, 26 going forward? Or, you know what I mean? Like, so I know that there's been ARPA funds, there's been CVRF funds, there's been all sorts of other funding sources available for the last couple of years. Is it because of those funds that are available that we've been in a better position? Do you think that, cuts to those are coming and people might actually go back to Chapter 115? Has there been any consideration in that? Are the VSOs talking about that, or is it not really a concern for 25? And then just as a follow-up, are your updates, and you'll have to forgive me because I don't remember, are they January updates for all of your renewals of the reporting, or is it July?
I see what you're saying. Okay, your first question is if there's any cuts at the state or federal level that might affect our Chapter 115. Not that I'm aware of, no. I'll give you a perfect example. Part B Medicare, okay, everybody on Chapter 115, we're reimbursing their Part B Medicare premiums, okay? Yes, it's gone up by almost $10 from last year. However, the threshold for the cutoff where they have to apply for what's called the Mass Health buy-in, which means that the state's gonna pick that up and not us, okay? That went up. So even though Part B went up in cost to us, the number of Chapter 115 recipients that are eligible for the buy-in also went up.
Okay.
So they went off our rolls and onto another program funded by Mass Health, okay, which saves us money, okay, but it keeps the veteran or the surviving spouse covered for expenses. But I'm the guy that's got to push it through for them, okay? So it's like I'm working to get my Chapter 115 budget down. Your second question was related to the recertification?
Yeah, is that
Okay.
January or July?
It's both.
Okay.
I recertify my veterans on a calendar year, okay? So notices go out in November, December. I start gathering all their documents to recertify them. This being like for those who are on Social Security, you'll know that your award letters usually coming to you around the holiday season, okay? So that's usually the one I'm waiting on, is the Social Security award letter, which changes their income. All right, so by January, I've got all my documents and I've recertified them. As far as July recertification, the only thing I require from them is something that has changed.
Okay.
Okay, and normally it's things like rent. Their rent changes, it goes up, and then I have to recalculate them.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Council Waterman.
Well, I certainly thank you for what you do, because you're helping a lot of people that need it.
Appreciate this.
My concern is vehicles. Where do we stand in the shape our vehicles are in? I noticed you went up $1,000 in your vehicle maintenance section.
Well,
but that isn't, I think you're gonna need even more than that if the vehicles are that old.
Well, you know, any community in the Commonwealth, your largest veteran population are baby boomers. Okay, what we know is Vietnam veterans. Okay, and they are quickly moving from retirees to elderly, and when that happens, they lose the ability to self-transport. They lose the ability to do things at home. So this program, and I really give Attleboro and its civic organizations credit. I mean, this program was started on philanthropy, if you will. All right, civic organizations like the Elks collaborated with the city and decided that, you know, they started a veteran transportation program. Okay, how many other VSOs are running transportation programs in the Commonwealth? I could probably count on one hand. All right, and I know this because we have our statewide VSO conference with DVS every week, and the topics come up. And you know, they've kind of taken a poll, which communities are out there doing transportation programs, and I'm probably one of 5 hands that goes up. Okay, so it's because it was started on that, I really have to try my best with the lean budget we have in the city to continue to run a transportation program. And the vehicles that were donated and funded by the Elks have continued to run, but they are starting to show their age, especially the wheelchair van. And more baby boomers are requiring wheelchair transport. Okay, it's just some of them are aging out. I have been able, with the support of the city, and I mean like the mayor's office and other departments, I have been able to salvage vehicles that would have gone to surplus. Instead, we sent them over to, I've had them worked on by the DPW, I've had them worked on by the Attleboro High School, and we've been able to get them back on the road. You know, these are like 2010s, a Prius or a Taurus or stuff like that. Every now and again, when I take the van over to DPW, they put it up on the lift and they're surprised it's still running. But that's just the way it looks underneath, okay? But we're doing the best we can. Yes, it's grown, okay? Right now, it won't be long until I'm doing 600 transports a year, which right now, I think I did about 545 transports last year. I had 68 different passengers using 18 different drivers. That's way up from where it was when I first got here. But that's just the sign of the times. It's just, I'm dealing with a population that's just needing more and more rides. And these are only to medical appointments, okay? I don't give them rides to pharmacies or to buy food or what have you. Other places that they really do need to go, I just limit it to, they have to be medical transports, and they can only be Attleboro veterans that I'm transporting. So I think it's probably going to continue to grow, but we're just going to, I'm just going to have to continue to try to find other ways to keep it going without, buying new cars, because, it's just, it's a tough market to even get them, but and I know I can do it. If I keep working with these civic organizations who have already reached out to me, I know that we can, if we have to replace these vehicles, we can. And I'm just going to have to work harder at coordinating with other department heads, maybe like the police department. See, maybe, if there's an Explorer that might be available before it completely goes kaput, we'll see. We just use our imagination. But I would like to continue with this transportation program, because if it's growing like it is, then you know that it's good for your veterans and their families. And I know from a personal standpoint, taking care of my dad, You know, when he was really, you know, had cancer and everything, he had 4 different doctors. He was calling me all the time, come get me. So I'm raising 4 kids, working a job. So I know, you know, it's not just important to veterans, it's important to their next of kin. You know, there's people who are currently trying to get them on all these appointments, you know. So.
Can you talk at all about your plans for the Global War on Terrorism monument for the City Common?
Much like we've done with other projects, I know my predecessor brought the wall here, which is really special to the city. We are going to try to do this with donations. So working with the mayor's office, I have formulated a committee for the Global War on Terrorism Monument. I've also been working with members of that committee to coordinate with the parks. First, I have to pass parks. Before I can bring it to you, I got to bring it to parks. And we have done 3 different presentations to them. I think at this point, we're ready to really show them what it's going to look like, where it's going to go, which is we want the commons, how it's going to look. We actually have a 3D image of it in dimensions. And I think that we're going to get ready to get the final approval by Parks to put it there. And then at that point, we're ready to probably start soliciting to the public for donations. We have an account set up through the VFW. So a 501c3, it can all go through there. Any businesses that donate can get their, you know, their tax deferment letter, you know, through that. So it's all set up at this point. Once I get final approval from the parks, I think at this point we're ready to go public and see who, you know, start taking donations. But that's our plan, is to get it funded that way. And I think it's going to look real nice. 3 pillars. It's going to be, you're going to look at it, if your back's to the train tracks, you're going to be looking at the current commons pillars. It's going to be between them. And once we have a final draft of it, I'll make sure you get a copy just so you know what it looks like. But like I say, hoping I can, you know, our goal is to get this thing funded strictly through donations. And if it gets built, I'll be coming to you to accept it.
Perfect.
This is to kind of give you an idea what we're going at here. It's going to be, we don't want it to be any taller than the current pillars that are there. We don't want to dwarf anything that's there. So it's going to be roughly the same size as the pillars there, but they're going to look a little different. They're going to be together, and each one of them says a little something different. They're going to have the 6 different military branches that participating, all the 6 different branches. In the middle, it's going to have more something geared towards specifically 9/11, global war on terrorism, and to the right. It's not going to have names on it. I know that that's something that's historical in this town. Names can be really problematic, okay, because it just, and I went through this when I was working VSO as Hanover. It just never ends. You know, there's another name and another name, or somebody was left off. So we're going to try to get away from names. It's going to have a nice bench. It's going to have illumination, nice, like different illumination, maybe blue. And we also want to make sure that it is easy to maintain. Between parks and everything else, it's, you know, everybody loves to spruce things up with vegetation and everything that looks great. And after the first year, and that's again something that happened in Hanover, they tried to create like this walking garden and never really kind of hammered out who's going to take care of all this vegetation. So we're really going to make this to be very durable and easy to maintain.
Perfect. I don't have anything else. Anybody?
Thanks, Ben.
Danny, thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you. Sorry about again if I was late.
No, you were early.
We're just used to everybody sitting out there waiting for us.
Eager.
Kept it pretty on.
Yeah, this is, I've never seen this before. Doesn't happen in my town.
Anybody have anything else before we adjourn? Does anybody have any further questions? Mason, do you want to add anything else?
No, again, if there's any follow-up, any materials you're looking for, anything you want to see in advance of the next committee meeting, questions you might have that you'd like department heads to have in advance, just let me know. And then if there's, you know, as things come up that you'd like to see a bigger, more robust presentation on, just let me know.
One quick question.
That's good.
Sorry,
Council
thank
LeVoy?
you. Many departments have like mentioned it, and I don't know if it was something we ever looked into when we were going into the fiscal 25 budget, was a grant writer position. Is that something we had looked into at any point during the process?
Yeah, so actually, there used to be a role in the mayor's office called the mayor's assistant, and the administration has very strongly considered reinvigorating that role and kind of incorporating grant funding, or a grant writer position in that. Unfortunately, just kind of where we are with the budget, it was just something we feel like we had the opportunity to do in this budget. But it's something we're going to continue to look at, as we sort of evaluate things as the budget becomes final with updated state aid, and when new growth is finalized, that's an opportunity to kind of reevaluate these things for future years. But at this point, we just didn't believe that it was going to be something we could do in this budget. But it is something we're looking at very closely.
Thank you. And Deb, anything further?
Thank you.
All right, hearing nothing else, I move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned at 9:19. Thank you, everyone.
Jason.